It was great news a couple of days ago when we heard about this, but obviously, were the hiccups to be expected? I think so. I think no one should be too shocked. This is something that has been in the works for a very long time. I think many have been saying that essentially this agreement that they've come to or settled on now, it's something that has largely been in place, or at least on the table, since May or June. So there's really been a lot in the background going on to get us to this point. Will it hold? I mean, the fact is, one concern on my part is if you look at this agreement, it is quite a long and drawn out agreement. We have three phases. First, which would be 42 days, excuse me. You'd see about 33 Israeli hostages returned in return for about 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. And then you'd see some, essentially the IDF moving closer to the borders and pulling back. The fact that this is so long and drawn out, that's my concern, because the more long and drawn out it is, the more risk there is for something to essentially go wrong. I mean, in just the last less than 2 days since we heard about this being struck, you've had this, back tit for tat, this back and forth between Netanyahu and Hamas. I think that you're saying this, and I deny that I did that. So this could go on. I think it's a good sign that we had the agreement signed, I think, overnight. Now we're waiting for what's going to be happening by the Israeli cabinet. I'm not sure if that's going to be happening today or tomorrow, but I think there might actually be some concern that if it does happen, for example, tomorrow, we could actually see this, ceasefire take place, not necessarily on Sunday, but possibly even on Monday. So there are some hiccups. I think generally there is the political will from all the actors that have been involved in this to push this along. And you have the likes of, Qatar and Egypt really overseeing this, as well as the US. There's hope, but I wouldn't necessarily be too sure that this is going to, go without any hiccups. That's going to be, I think hiccups are to be expected. The issue is how easily can we get past each one of those?
Indeed. And so key hurdles still remain, but there is hope. There's optimism that this will take place either Sunday or Monday and finally bring some relief to the region that's been on edge watching these negotiations unfold for several months now. Let's talk about the translation for oil as well. Of course, we're closely watching the impact for risk assets here. How much of the price surge that we've seen in crude is due to the geopolitical tensions versus broader supply-demand dynamics? This has also been interesting to watch as we see Brent crude up around 10% since the start of the year.
Right. I mean, the demand story has been something we've been looking at for a while. I don't necessarily think the demand side picture has changed that much. The concerns continue to be there. But as we're talking about the geopolitics, I think that premium has kind of risen over the last few weeks. I mean, I think that's probably been the driver here over the last couple of weeks. When it comes to the current situation, I know generally we're looking at a situation which is good news, okay? But my concerns really are about kind of what's going to be happening around what everyone is focusing on at the moment in Gaza and Israel here. You have other actors in the region who, they are stakeholders here. I think it's fair to say, for example, I have a question here as to where does this leave Iran? Iran, I think today is much weaker, in a much weaker position today than it was 6 months ago, 8 months ago. It's had essentially its security blanket pulled quite severely. So as of now, we're not really hearing too much out of Tehran in terms of what next or what we could do. I think you're hearing the normal rumblings as to Israel needs to make sure that it actually sticks to its word, and it actually goes ahead with this cessation of military activities. But essentially, in Iran that's quite cornered and quite weak, it could go one of two ways. Either it essentially understands that now is not the time to be inflaming the tensions further, especially with a Trump presidency beginning in a few days, or it says, you know what, now is the time to actually show that we're still here. We haven't gone away like most seem to be saying. So Iran, I think, is an important an important player here to look at when we look into the oil picture. We obviously have the Trump administration saying, or at least suggestions, that they're going to be putting pressure on Iranian oil and Venezuelan oil coming in, at least early on in his term. So essentially, if we see some impact on those barrels, I don't know how quickly that impact would come, but definitely I think something should be expected.